My father thought it was a great idea to take his kids to a dude ranch. It is not a good idea to take your kids to a dude ranch. There's nothing in it for them. The whole thing was obviously designed for adults to hang out, and we, at best, were side baggage. Like a cruise that provides a room for kids to play in, or a variety of activities intended to distract them away from the parents. There were a number of different buildings at this dude ranch designed for the kids to go into while the adults had fun. One of these was an arcade. Less an arcade, though, than a series of machines, maybe 5 or 6, that were not well maintained and sat in a room way too overlit with fluorescent light and not representing in any way the kind of arcades that I loved when I was home. One of these machines was an Asteroids machine, and it had a little bit of a mechanical problem. The coin box was open. This wasn't a really big deal because all of the machines were set to free play, so there weren't any quarters inside. But it meant that I, at a very young age, could glance inside of this arcade machine and finally see the secrets within. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, a podcast about technology, history, and getting myself out of debt. Thanks to Daniel Boyd, Eric Vitello, Jeff Atwood, and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. This Asteroids machine was a standard issue 1979-1980 era machine, one of the best-selling video games of that time. There were tens of thousands of these units out there. They were built like tanks. They were extremely expensive, but it was clear that this machine had been run through the gauntlet. It had been beat up a little bit, and among its problems was a very loose coin door. Because very few other kids were playing video games during the day, I got to really study what was going on with the inside of this machine when I opened up the coin door. One of the most shocking parts of looking inside of a machine like this is how empty it is. Asteroids machines had very heavy wood on the side, ensuring that they would stay in one place while people used them. They were also thick and high, designed to be formidable in a room. But when you looked inside of this machine, there was nothing there. There was just a circuit board propped up against one side, providing all the calculation, all of the video driving, everything the video game needed, while the rest of it, empty, utterly empty. Looking inside, it was a huge box, not even painted, showing particle board, a few scant wires going to the power supply in the bottom of the box, and also, as I foolishly put my hand inside and patted around looking for treasure, the most important of all the components. My hand fell on some sort of papers that were at the bottom of the unit, and grabbing them and pulling them out, I realized that I had in my hands an actual, authentic manual for an Atari Asteroids arcade machine. I can't overstate the feelings that ran over me. In the case of the many manuals of video games are simply photocopied paper, but the Atari manual had a professionally printed multicolor cover to go along with its documentation, giving me, completely inexperienced with manuals, the sense that I was holding a precious tome, an insight into the operations of this machine. Clutching it like a thief who didn't even know his good luck, I grabbed it and ran back to our room/cabin at the Dude Ranch, and eagerly, through the next few days, would take this printed wonder out and leaf through it. I'm happy to say I did find some fun aspects of the Dude Ranch, did make some friends, did enjoy the dinners and the entertainment that the kids had, but there was an extra spice added to everything, knowing that this forbidden manual was in my suitcase at the room. The Atari manual covered all the aspects of gameplay, instructed you on dip switches, informed you with the schematics of the machine, expecting you to be able to operate it, to repair it, to make decisions based on this documentation. The machine, after all, had cost thousands of dollars in 1970s money. This was, depending on your outlook, either a luxury item or a piece of industrial equipment that only a rare few could have for any amount of time, which explains why so many arcade operators would lease machines from distributors, unable to spend the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for all of these brand new arcade machines that they would need to fill up their business. The manual, therefore, was an honest, supportive document meant to allow somebody in a far-reaching area, unable to use any sort of shipping equipment or reach out to a technical expert, providing a granted ability to look through the parts, test and replace circuits that had been damaged, and as soon as possible, get the machine back on the floor, gaining its quarters, earning its keep. That manual was my first insight into the idea that there was an entity, some sort of group or organization behind these machines. I'd seen the logos. I had seen that there were different firms with some sort of icon representing their kind of work, but I'd not yet graduated up to the idea that there were companies that maintained all of the infrastructure to make these arcades come alive. In fact, I barely understood that there were individual humans who did programming, some sort of technical wizardry to make the actual games, and that there were prototypes and revisions and different versions of these games that I loved, that they didn't just emerge fully formed from some sort of dark cave deep in California or Chicago or Japan. They were just magical to me. And this manual showed me that this magic had a spell book. Years later, my first and only time I would own a video game, it was an Asteroids machine. And it worked beautifully, keeping in my house in New York, following me to Boston, living, as it currently does, in a lab at MIT, being played by new generations of college students coming to terms with the unique aspects of a vector monitor. But back then, the Asteroids manual, a palpable piece of this magical machine, came home with me. I kept it as one keeps all precious things, in a box of mementos and memories, of accomplishments and love notes. And as I moved from place to place to place, I would always have these boxes with me, in storage, in my home, and to the present day. I still have that original, beautiful Asteroids manual. And the day I started working for the Internet Archive, when I was still finding my way about with the system and how it worked, and how one could add items and media types and everything else, the very first collection I worked so hard to add was an arcade manuals collection. I will not pretend to be the person who scanned them all. Many folks had done that over many years. Arcade machines, as they entered into their second and third decade of existence, needed these manuals, needed explanations as to how to operate them, how to repair them, how they functioned. PDFs instead of documents made total sense, and people traded these on various websites, sometimes locking them behind paywalls or passwords, and other times making them freely available to all, which I ultimately did with the Arcade Manuals collection. Over time, hundreds of manuals have shown up there, games that barely made a dent in the market, while others persist as true, unquestioned classics. There's gameplay, there's schematics, there's even ads for other products made by the company. All of them searchable, all of them accessible, and, perhaps most importantly, each one an insight into the minds that made these games come to life. It's a lesson that I probably would have learned anyway, perhaps with a little less vandalism, that inside of technology, inside these boxes of wonder we place ourselves in, there are people working extraordinarily hard to account for the kind of folks who will be on the other end, the folks who will not only have to use this machinery, this technology, this program, but will have to maintain it, repair it, and most importantly of all, understand it. The Internet Archive now has millions of these manuals available for all sorts of equipment and processes. Baked into these documents in all their various ways are the lore, the relics, the culture, and the beliefs of a species, trying to understand the world and how it functions, and sharing it with others. For that reason, I truly feel that this love affair with manuals that I've held ever since that first summer love has been one of my most important and meaningful discoveries. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, thanks to James Bekoyanu, Mark Pilgrim, Peter Healy, Emilio Oliveira, Ernie Hershey, Michael Rubin, Matt Reynolds, Sean Kelly, Manxalot, John Sturm, and Anonymous, along with the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. I can't really endorse reaching inside of an arcade machine with all of its different wiring and dangerous circuits inside and extracting a critical component for maintaining that machine. But if you go on to become somebody who shepherds in millions of these and provides them to an untold audience of many millions, ensuring that the knowledge is passed on to other generations, well, I hope you'll give me a pass.